Since Saturday, I've been getting increasingly annoyed that almost every aspect of my daily life is now canceled or banned or closed. Originally, much of this was due to the voluntary decision-making of the business owner or the organization, but now much of it is due to government decree. My county, much like many across the country, is now forcibly shuttering its so-called non-essential businesses by government order. I can't go to the bar. I can't eat at a restaurant. I can't go to the gym. I can't go see a movie. All of this, and I'm still one of the luckier ones. I'm sure many of you listening to this are actually under even stricter social distancing edict than I am. It's so bad now that Canada is closing its border to non-citizen entry. I guess we've finally found the one thing stronger than diversity. It's so bad we finally found the one thing that'll get you arrested in San Francisco: going out for a breath of fresh air. And that's not just San Francisco proper, mind you. That's 7 Bay Area counties with 7 million people now told by the government they are not to leave their homes for anything other than essential trips to the grocery store and the pharmacy and the like. Essential services will remain, says the mayor. Your garbage will be picked up, but poop and needles will remain properly scattered throughout the street. Of course, the police chief says authorities are looking for voluntary compliance. They don't want a criminal justice approach to a public health issue, but if you disobey, you'll face a misdemeanor charge. So go ahead and loot businesses in San Francisco. That's no charge, of course, but try to patronize one? Okay, that's enough. Put your hands where I can see them. So apparently we're just going to ravage the small businesses that are the backbones of our communities. We're just going to ravage the mom and pop business owners who aren't monopoly men. They operate at a very thin margin to keep their prices down for their customers. We're just going to ravage the low-wage workers that keep these places operational, in turn ravaging our local economies to a national scale. But don't worry, the government will just take out yet another cash advance on the infinite credit card, or they'll just print some more funny money and hand you a bag. Hang on to your toilet paper. At this rate, it really will be the currency of the future, and your cash will be the more suitable asswipe. And look, I get it. This is a serious sickness with serious consequences for certain segments of the population. We should have a serious discussion about what sort of short-term economic sacrifices are necessary to avoid long-term irreversible health disaster, up to and including death for many of these people. My intent is not to mock that reality. My intent is to consider all sides of this issue seriously, and just as seriously consider the possibility that the damage we are doing to ourselves by choice may be worse than the damage inherent to the disease. And maybe you're one of the many people raising your eyebrow in skepticism at me right now, and you're thinking, who the hell is this idiot? He doesn't have any special medical knowledge or qualification. You're right, I don't. I'm just a guy. And I don't want to impose my opinion on you. I want you to think for yourself and to act accordingly. But that's exactly what has me concerned. Each day, your ability and your right to do that for yourself is being diminished more than it was yesterday. All by the wave of the magic wand of the authority that we all must trust and obey automatically, or face the wrath of the Twitter mobs to shame us. It's the removal of that fundamental element of choice that has me concerned, not whether people make the same choices I do or not. I'm the sort of person that values that freedom to choose over what is actually chosen. So yes, I do want to hear from the experts. I want to know the recommendations from people who have more expertise on this issue than I have. But the second you tell me that your advice is mandatory, well, in that case, you can stick it up your ass, you piece of shit, motherfucker. F you, I'm an American. I do what I want. I'll lick every doorknob in sight before I let you have my liberty. See Patrick Henry. And that's not just the American spirit. That's the American Constitution, too. Throughout this tightening crackdown, with every new restriction, I keep wondering, how is this even legal? How is this even constitutional? How are you depriving us of fundamental freedoms just because you say so? Because it seems to me that turns the Bill of Rights into tomorrow's toilet paper too. I figure learning the answers to these questions is a better use of my time than daring the police to come arrest me for eating a sandwich inside of a Subway on principle. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Understand our rights as they relate to mandatory business shutdown, or mandatory curfew or mandatory quarantine or any of the other forthcoming Chinese-style authoritarianism to complement this Chinese virus. The question, in as basic terms as possible, is this: can the government quarantine a person against his will? Or is that a violation of that person's constitutional rights? Now, just like I'm not an epidemiologist, I am also not a constitutional lawyer. I'm just a guy trying to make sense of the world around him. But it seems to me this question is a conflict between two constitutional principles, two amendments in the Bill of Rights. Your Fifth Amendment right not to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and your state's 10th Amendment right to police power. To me, there is no question that your fundamental life, liberty, and property rights are being deprived of you if you live under the San Francisco model. You are not free to live the life you want. You can't walk around freely. According to any common understanding of the term liberty, business owners are not free to use and manage their property as they see fit. You are not free to use your property in the form of money to patronize them as you see fit. And there was no due process in depriving you of those rights. It's just that somebody important said so. But you were never given a trial. You were never given an opportunity to present your case against them. On the other side, states have broad police power. Per the 10th Amendment, powers not specifically assigned to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people, and courts have interpreted those powers broadly. And so even though I'm frustrated with what I worry are overly dramatic reactions to coronavirus, I also believe it's important on principle to defend states' rights to manage these problems. And that's what's happening in this case, at least so far. The federal government is issuing guidelines and recommendations, but it's the states that are actually doing the rulemaking and the enforcement. If you try to go out on the town in San Francisco tonight, it's not the feds who are going to bust you. It's the suddenly empowered San Francisco police. And yeah, I know, there's a whole debate about whether or not the Bill of Rights was ever intended to apply to the states and not just the federal government. There's a credible case that's the correct interpretation, in which case there is no actual conflict here. But for the purposes of this discussion, let's operate within the current legal framework, where the states are just as responsible to uphold your constitutional rights as the feds are. In that context, what wins out here? Your Fifth Amendment rights or your state's 10th Amendment rights? And so I skipped my subway rebellion and my doorknob licking, and I spent a few hours reading into the issue, and it turns out the totally unsatisfying, underwhelming answer is, drum roll please, we don't know. Or at least we've never answered that question. And by we, of course, I mean the Supreme Court, who decides this sort of thing. They have never addressed the issue, at least in the specific context of infectious disease. We've had some cases that are close, most notably Addington versus Texas from 1979, when the court held that people with mental illness who present a threat to themselves or others can be involuntarily committed and confined in a mental hospital, as long as the government can provide clear and convincing evidence that the confinement is justified. According to the court, that is the only due process requirement necessary in that context. So we have to assume it's likely the court would apply similar reasoning to today's mandatory coronavirus self-quarantines, as long as the state can provide clear and convincing evidence that you going about your business is a danger to yourself or others. Your business will cease. That's a standard that's much too low for my own satisfaction. The state could provide clear and convincing evidence that you're a danger to yourself or others driving your multi-ton truck to haul all that toilet paper home during this quarantine. That same sort of logic could be used to weld you inside your home commie style. But I suppose for today, all I can do is appreciate the silver lining in the compromise that at least it's the states making these decisions. It's not a federal government cram down. If I hate the way my state is handling this situation, at least I still have the freedom to hit the highway in search of a better one. For now, at least. And while I'm forced to swallow my principles for the common good, at gunpoint, if I push it, the most realistic thing I can do in the moment is appreciate those silver linings. At the end of all this nonsense, more people will be preparedness-minded in the future, and that's a good thing. More people will see the value in the Second Amendment now that they've tried to panic buy a gun and they realize it's not as easy as the politicians tell you. Perhaps we'll pull some production out of China. and we'll bring it back home to America. And perhaps somewhere right now, there's some bright young lawyer working diligently through his quarantine time to challenge these draconian measures later in court. And we'll get these questions answered and some rules defined for next time by the people whose opinions matter way more than mine do. The Supreme Court. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.